On this video, I'm going to continue what I have been doing, and that is working through the Hebrew of the book of Job, reading the Hebrew, translating it into English, uh, along with a running commentary. So we are now at chapter 27. This is Job's answer to his friends. It's the final words of Job in 27 to 31. It's a part of that. And so this will be his answer to his friend. So we come to his defense. It was Zophar turn to speak. But what is striking, Zophar is not going to speak. There's this silence. And I'm assuming that there's no more arguments that they are able to present. So Job continues. He begins in chapter 27 by first of all, again, protesting his innocency and the truthfulness of what he's been saying. And this will be found in the first 6 verses of chapter 27. And it begins, Vayosef Yov se'et meshalo vayomar. And Joseph took up a parable and said, Chai el hasir mishpati, v'shadai hemar nafshi. Basically, as the Lord lives, who has taken away the justice due me, who has taken away my right, and the Almighty, who has dealt bitterly with my soul. As we look at verse 2, notice God will not give Job his righteous judgment and declare him innocent. And instead, God has dealt bitterly with him, Job is saying, by severely afflicting him in life. And so he continues, verse 3, Ki hol od nishmati vi. And while all the while my breath is yet in me, Beruach Eloah be'api, and the Spirit of God is in my nostrils. And we continue in verse 4, Im tedaberna sefati avla. Surely my lips will not speak unrighteousness. Uleshoni im yegeh remiyah. Nor my tongue utter or bring forth deceit. In other words, I will not do that. As we look at this, as long as Job has life that God gives him, he vows only to speak the truth in defending his innocency. So again, this has been a theme that Job has been driving forth all the way through. And so in verse 5, Halilali im atzdik etchem, ad egva lo asir tumati mimeni. That is, far be it from me that I would justify you, that I would agree with what you fellows have been saying is his point. Until I expire, I will not turn away or put away my own integrity, or my integrity, which is from me. What Job is saying here in verse 5 is he maintains his integrity in spite of his friends' accusations. So Job repudiates the thought of agreeing with his friends who argue Job has committed gross sin. He keeps repudiating that. And so we continue in verse 6. Betzadkati echazarti velo arpe lo yecharaf levavi miyamai. My righteousness, with my righteousness I hold fast, and I will not release it, will not let it go. My heart shall not reproach me as long as I have life. All of my days, from my days, my heart will not reproach me. And so Job examines his heart. He says his conscience brings no sin to his mind. And so again, he's continuing to bring the theme that he has brought forth all along. So as we move in then to verse 7 and following, he's going to continue by talking about the fate of the wicked. And this is 7 to 23. And so the text reads in verse 7, Yehi Rasha or Yavi. Let my enemy be as the wicked. Umit komami avel haval. That is, and let him that rises up against me be as one that is unrighteous. And so Job is saying here, he requests that his enemies, that is, those that say he is unrighteous, be as the wicked. Let them be judged as wicked for their unrighteous conclusion about him. And he continues then describing the wicked. Verse 8. Kima tekvat hanef ki yivsa. For what is the hope of the godless, even though he get gain? Ki yeshel aloa nafsho. When God actually takes away his soul, what hope has the wicked then? And so death does not bring any gain to the godless, is Job's point. Job states his detestation of the wicked and his gain in these words. Job, in this passage, is really agreeing with his friends that the hope of the wicked is destroyed when God takes the life of the wicked. The big difference between Job and his friends' argument, though, is that Job is not among them, is not among those that are wicked. This has been his whole point all along. So he agrees that the wicked will be judged, but he also is saying, I'm not part of the wicked. And so in verse 9, the text continues, Ha sa'akato yishma el. Will God hear his cry? Ki tavo alav sarah, when trouble comes upon him. And we can compare a reference to Psalm 66:18 here. Will God hear the cry of the wicked when trouble comes upon him? Will God actually respond then? The expected answer is no, God will not. And then in verse 10, Im al Shaddai yit anag yikra Eloah bechol eit. Will he have delight in the Almighty and will he call upon God at all times, in every time? Again, he alludes to the wicked man again. Unlike the righteous, he's not able to call upon God at all times and expect him to deliver him. Some of the references that can be found that would parallel this would be chapter 19, 25, 25, and Psalm 62, verse 8. And so the wicked will not be able to call upon God at this time, is his thought. So in verses 11 to 23, these words are contrary to Job's previous argument and previous statements. What seems to be happening is Job seems to be guessing what Zophar would have said if he had not declined to speak. It is possible that Job may be directing these words toward his three so-called friends, quote unquote. They are wicked because of their false accusations of Job. Thus, using their basic language, Job addresses them as the wicked, on whom God must vindicate his wrath. And so this is a rather difficult passage. And I would refer one to the commentary by Driver on Job for some suggestions about this particular passage. So we begin in verse 11. Oreh etchem beyad el. I will teach you concerning the hand of God. Asher im Shaddai lo achahed. That is, I will teach you concerning the hand of God, which the Almighty, which is really with the Almighty, I will not conceal it. And so in 11, Job is saying, I'm going to teach you about the hand of God and what he is like. And so he continues in verse 12. Hein atim kulchim hazitim. Behold, all of you have seen it. Belama zeh hevel techbalu. And why then? Why is it that you are all together vain in what you think and what you have been saying? So in verse 12, Job now indirectly accuses his friends of really neglecting to look at all the facts. Knowing that the fate of the wicked is, knowing what it is, they place themselves in that fate by their strong arguments and treatment against Job and how they have treated him. And so he continues in the next verses. talking about the picture of the wicked person. Zeh Halek Adam Rasha Im El. This is the portion of the wicked man with God. The Nachalat Daritzim Mishadai Yakahu, and the heritage of the oppressors, which from the Almighty, which they will receive. So in verse 13, this verse now is going to introduce what follows in 14 and following. So he continues, Im Yirbu Vanav Lemo Harib. If his children are multiplied, it is for the sword. Atza'av lo yispa'u lachem. That is, and his offspring shall not have sufficient bread. And so Job is saying in verse 14, if he has many children, the prosperity of it is only to see them die in war or famine. This is a satirical moment on the prosperity of the wicked. This is what Job is saying. And then he continues in verse 15. Seridav b'mavet yikaveru. That is, those that are remaining, that remain of him, shall be buried in death. But almanotav lo tivkena, and his widows shall even not make lamentation. And so those of his children who might escape the war and the resulting famine will die in the plague of pestilence. They will die, and their widows will perform no funeral rites, seems to be the thought that Job is presenting. And then in verse 16, it continues, Im yitzbor ke'afar kaskasiv, though he heap up silver as dust. V'chachomer yachin malvush, and though as clay he prepare it, though prepare the raiment or clothing as clay. Whatever he does, the thought's going to be that the righteous will eventually take over the accumulated wealth of the wicked. We'll see this carried on in the next verse. It says, he may prepare it, but the just will put it on. Notice, Yachin v'tzadik yovash, v'chesef naki yahalog. That is, he shall prepare it, but the just shall put it on, and the innocent shall divide the silver. So what is happening here is that although the wicked heap up treasure as dust and multiply many different costly garments, the righteous will take over his accumulated wealth. This is his argument about the end, so to speak, of the wicked. And so he continues then in the next verse, Bana va'ash beito, he builds his house as the moth. So as the moth, he builds his house. Uhe sukkah asa notser. And as a booth which the keeper makes. And so the thought here, and you might refer back to chapter 8:14 and 4:19. The house of the wicked is fragile like a spider's web, and his house is also like a temporary shelter which were built by the guards who watched the vineyards near harvest time. They were easily knocked down after the harvest was over, and it shall not endure. That's the thought. Whatever the wicked build, it will not endure. And Isaiah chapter 1, verse 8 is a parallel with this same thought in mind. And so we continue then in verse 19 as Job continues to talk about the wicked. Ashir Yishkav v'lo ye'aseh. He lies down rich, but there shall be nothing that shall be gathered. In other words, he will not be able to gather anything. Einav pakach ve'einenu. He opens his eyes, but it is not. That is, his wealth is not there. And again, the rich, evil man one day wakes up to find all of his riches gone, is his argument. In verse 20, he continues, Kasigehu chamayim balahot. That is, tears overtake him as waters, or like waters, they overtake him. Lila genavatu sufa. A tempest steals away in the night, or literally in the night, a tempest steals away. And in verse 20, the thought is like a flash flood carrying away everything in its path. He is swept away by various terrors, the wicked man. And we see similar thought in Isaiah 8:7-8 and Jeremiah 47, verse 2. He is hurled suddenly out of his house at night like a whirlwind. And then he continues in the next verse, verse 21. Yisa'ehu kadim v'yelik. That is, the east wind carries him away, and he goes away, or he departs. V'sa'arehu mime komo. It sweeps him out of his place, and it sweeps him away from his place. The violent eastern, he's referring to a violent eastern Sirocco wind here, is pictured carrying him away out of his place of dwelling. And he continues in verse 22, V'yashlech alav v'lo yachmo. It hurls at him and does not spare, that is, the violent wind. Miyado berucha yivra. From his power against the wind, who will flee? In other words, who is going to flee from the hand or the power of the wind? And the thought here is God is understood, and he's the subject, and he hurls his lightning bolts at the wicked as he tries to flee from the hand of God. And so finally in verse 23, Yispok alemo chapemo, that is, men clap their hands at him. V'yishrok alav mimekomo, and they actually hiss at him out of his place, or they shall hiss him out of his place. And what it seems to be saying here is simply men in nature will applaud God when he destroys the wicked. We see another parallel text in Nahum chapter 3:19. The wicked then will be the object of derision. Similar language is found in Lamentation 2:15 and 16 and Jeremiah 25 verse 9. So the next movement we've already done, and that is Job's exaltation of true wisdom, where it can be found in chapter 28, and it's in the fear of the Lord. And the next time I do a video, we'll pick up in 29 to 31, and we'll follow Job's thought, or the thought of the author, and then this will lead us to the final speech that will come after that, Elihu. So I'm going to stop here at this point, trying to work through each verse with a running commentary and reading the Hebrew text and working through it. And so I hope this is helpful. I did not do the grammar at every point here, but I hope it's helpful.